Welcome to the FemiNinja Project. I am your host, Cheryl I Love, middle-aged ninja hiding in plain sight, dedicated to restoring human dignity one person at a time and helping you unleash your personal power. Discover that it's possible to look like a woman, act like a lady, move like a ninja, and think like a warrior. And remember, men are always welcome on the FemiNinja Project. Hello and welcome to another episode of the FemiNinja Project. And thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. You know, life sometimes doesn't always go the way we plan. And oftentimes we come to either crossroads in our lives or obstacles or life changes that require a transition. And our guest today is going to be talking about that. Her name is Shira Raymond, and she is the founder and owner of Suddenly Single, empowerment coaching for Gen X and beyond. Shira walked away from her marriage of 24 years when her marriage became stagnant and her husband was going through an identity crisis. So she really knows what it's like to be suddenly single at a certain age. So she actually now empowers Gen X onward women how to start their lives over again with self-love and a sense of purpose. So she's going to talk about that today and explain how you can be divorced and live with joy and excitement for the future that you can create any way you desire. Shira, wow, that's a lot.
Hi, thank you so much, Cheryl, for having me on.
I am so happy that you came on today, and I am so excited to have you here and to hear your story.
Thank you.
So I'm just going to ask you how you got started and got the idea for Suddenly Single.
You know, it was interesting. I was thinking I've been doing coaching and empowerment work and working with really a lot of women with trauma in their life. And that was really fulfilling to see the transformation that these people can have in such a short period of time. But I wanted something more that really resonated with me. And as you said, you know, I just recently walked away from my marriage of 24 years. And I was trying to think of what am I going to call my podcast? What would be a great name for it? And you know how you get that burst of inspiration at 3:00 in the morning.
Uh-huh.
Well, actually, this one wasn't at 3:00 in the morning. I was driving with my daughter and I was like, don't forget this name. It's so great. Suddenly Single. And so I just took it on. And it's like, I feel like because I'm there, I resonate with it. I've been doing a lot of self-work for the last 3 or 4 years. And that's probably what really led to me seeing this big stagnation in my marriage. I knew that it would hold me back if I didn't go forward and do what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And so being Suddenly Single, I want to help all those women that are, you know, either going through the divorce process who are recently single from a long-term breakup, or even women who are suddenly widowed, because, you know, it's a little bit different, but, you know, still having to redefine yourself with self-love and really looking to create a different future than what you had in the past.
Well, it's almost like I don't want to say have to recreate yourself, but all of a sudden there you're somebody's wife and mother, and you're in this relationship, this marriage. And then all of a sudden, you know, it's almost like your life just turns around on a dime.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, the other thing with it is we can, you know, I've talked to other women, obviously, that are in the same situation, and they look back at their marriage of 30, 40 years and they say, yeah, he was really great here, but here he was, you know, really controlling and this and that. And yet they stuck in the marriage for whatever reason, maybe because in their culture, you know, divorce isn't an option, or they didn't feel like they could survive on their own. You know, there's a lot of different reasons why somebody would stay in a marriage longer than they really should. Mm-hmm. But taking those insights on what was good and what wasn't good can really help you to define what you want or who you want to be in the future. Because, you know, when we are, like you said, you know, the wife, the mother, we kind of get stuck in these patterns and we forget to dream.
Mm.
And, all the empowerment coaches and everybody out there tells you to dream so big that it scares you. Just the thought of it scares you. Well, why can't you do that with a relationship also? Or what the kind of life that you want to create as a single person? There's nothing holding you back but you. And so, I want us to get back to that point and allow these women to really think big, dream big of what their life could be, even if they decide to stay single the rest of their life, or if they decide to get into a different relationship, not settling just because they don't want to be single anymore.
That's a really good point, because I think a lot of women and men maybe would be terrified. It's like all of a sudden they don't have a partner, and it really messes up with their identity, maybe their self-image and their belief systems of, have to have a partner in life. So I just think it would be such a difficult transition for a lot of people to make.
And for a lot of women, it is because, unfortunately, they say like the top 5% of people are the ones who really work on themselves. Dr. David Hawkins, when he talks about emotional intelligence, he used muscle testing as a way to kinesiology, they call it, the scientific name, to test different emotions and where they are vibrationally. And the very bottom of the chart is shame at 20. But when you start to get to courage, that's 200. And that can go either way. Either you can go up from there into the positive vibrational numbers, or you can go down even lower. And most of us don't realize that we have control over our emotions and how to get into that state. Like joy is 500. Unconditional love is, love is 500, unconditional love is 540, joy 600, and then enlightenment 700. So how do you get into those higher emotional states to be really happy with where you're at, and to have the courage to just live life completely differently than you ever have in the past? And we have that ability if we can learn to let go of the fear, the guilt, the shame, the pride. Pride is also a negative emotion, and all those lower emotions, and start to move up. And apparently, according to Dr. David Hawkins, only 5% of the world's population actually moves themselves up into these positive states of being.
That's really kind of sad to think about.
It is. But what I want to do is to change that and to help women reach those higher states so they're happy with where they're at and beyond. And they're just happy and full of joy all the time, because now they've learned to live in the moment. They've learned to live mindfully. They've learned to forgive maybe themselves or the other people in their lives. And one of the important things I think with forgiveness, you don't have to say it to that other person that I forgive you. Forgiveness is really about letting yourself let go. So you're not hanging onto those emotions and allowing that person to have free rent in your head all day long, blaming them for your miserable sense of self right now.
I love that you put it that way, that living rent free in your head, because forgiveness is really a touchy thing. I always struggled with forgiveness, but then when I realized I wasn't forgiving the other person, I was forgiving myself for maybe not moving on. And it's just like, it really changed my life. And it was like, okay, you might have hurt me, whatever, you're out of my life. I wish you well. Bye-bye.
Exactly.
Rather than hanging on to it like a dog with a bone. It just doesn't, it's not healthy.
Absolutely. And I heard something really powerful a few years back. I read it, I think, that this woman who was one of Mengele's in World War II victims, and she held on to that, what he had done for her, and that hatred her whole life, until she finally got in her 80s. And she said, you know what? I decided to forgive him, not for who he is and what he did, but just so I could start living again.
Mm, wow, that's pretty powerful.
Right. And why do we have to hang on to that for 30, 40 years because somebody else did something to us? Like we all
Hmm.
have our baggage.
Hmm.
Let it go.
So I kind of want to circle back and talk about when you started your journey of this self-awareness and this personal growth and what started it, or was it just something that you've always been interested your entire life? I know you do have a background in hypnotherapy and some other modalities, I think, too, as well as NLP and a few other things.
Absolutely.
So if you could maybe talk about that, address that, and maybe how that influenced you into getting into this empowerment coaching.
Yes, absolutely. So I had gone back to school about 6 or 7 years ago and have a degree as a mind body in transformational psychology from the Southwest Institute of Healing Arts.
Woo.
Yeah. And in that, I got exposed to a lot of new, well, for me, they were new. Obviously, they've been around for a long time. Like I have my certification as a certified clinical hypnotherapist. Recently, and I had intro classes and things like NLP, but I actually just went through a whole new certification in that as well, and timeline therapy. But I had this really amazing client that came to me. Her husband had an affair and she was deciding whether to stay with him or not. And from that very first session, it was hypnotherapy. It became very clear that this woman was something special, because I did a series of scripts with her. And the last one was where I put her kind of in a protective bubble that no harm could come in, only love and positive emotions. And I had her invite in somebody who represented unconditional love to her. And she had invited her father, who had passed away when she was like 13 years old from a brain aneurysm.
Oh.
Yeah. And the two of them literally had a conversation for like 20 minutes. And I just kind of sat back in awe watching this with my mouth wide open. And it was very clear who was speaking at the time. Her father would address her, my child, my daughter, and just to see this interaction. And her father told her that she has a very special healing gift and we need to figure out what it is. And so over the next year, basically every session was getting her to meet with her messengers or guides to heal whatever she needed to heal that week, but then also to learn what this healing gift was for her. And sometimes she would be in the hypnotic trance state for like 2 hours,
Mm.
2.5 hours, and having these conversations going back and forth with her messengers and guides and with her. And I would take notes upon notes, pages on pages of notes. And it was just not only transformational for her, but for me, because all of a sudden I got to see something completely different that I had never experienced before in my life. And from that experience, it got me to start looking at different things like law of attraction and how that plays out in our life. And so I started studying Dr. Bruce Lipton and Joe Dispenza and, all those great people. And then it also led me to Dr. David Hawkins, where he talks about the emotional intelligence and how we can start to raise ourselves in our, we're vibrational beings and energetic beings. I mean, if we weren't, look, when we flatline, what do? They shock us with electricity to bring us back. So our emotions are also energetic, and that actually comes out of our heart. Those energy fields up to 8 meters, they say.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's been, there's an organization called Heart Math that measures that heart coherence. So this is all based on science. This isn't like woo-woo stuff that I'm saying, even though it sounds like it. And so it just really started me on my own journey of, kind of devouring all this stuff and really internalizing it to the point where, I go through life now and I just feel like even when bad things happen, I just, okay, thank God, that obviously I'm supposed to learn something from this experience and go forward. And I'm not going to let these little things hold me back from accomplishing and dreaming big and creating a bigger life than I ever thought possible.
I would really like to have you talk a little bit more. I think was it heart mapping or the heart science that you were talking about? Because like how the heart would react to certain emotions, and that just kind of triggered something in my brain because I know it could be the cause of a lot of heart disease. Even a little dog, I have done rescue for years, and we got a little dog out of the shelter, and this was, oh my gosh, about 14 years ago. And the minute I held her in my hand, I had my hand on her chest, and I looked at my husband and I said, she has a bad heart. And she had like this incredible murmur, and she ended up with kennel cough, and the dog was so sick for about 2 weeks. I kept looking at him and saying, she's going to die, she's not going to live. And he says, I know. And that was what, 14 years ago, and she's still alive today. Wow. And I remember telling a friend of mine about it, how she still has the heart murmur, but how she just turned around like so much and came back to health and vitality. And the chiropractor looked at me and said, her heart, you gave her love. Maybe that's what she needed to heal. And I thought, whoa, that's heavy.
Exactly. So this organization is called heartmath.org, and they actually chart heart energy around the world. And I heard, what's his name? Greg Braden. So he was talking about this on one of his lectures, that right before 9/11, they found that there was a dip the day before in the energy of the world because of all that negative energy from right before the terrorist attack. And so, yeah, it's crazy.
Wow.
So, you can look on their website and get more information. I've done a little research on it, but most of it is like hearing this from other people. But, this is all done. They have machines that track this, obviously. And in fact, in one of Greg Braden's lectures, he had the machine there and had everybody hold hands and just think of unconditional love. And they changed the vibration in the room.
Wow.
And you could see it on the chart, that he had on the screen. So, I mean, look, we've all been around people who are so negative that, you can spot them across the room. You feel that energy and it's like, oh my gosh, let me, stay away from them. And the same thing happens that when you're around somebody who's really positive and energetic and feels really good, that they have this really positive energy around them that attracts you to them. Mm-hmm. That's a choice. You can choose to be happy, filled with joy, filled with love in those higher emotional states. You can choose to be the victim or the survivor, mm-hmm. right? It's all about our thinking, but those emotions all come out of our heart. And that's why they can measure them out 8 meters.
Wow.
Which is incredible.
It is incredible. And it also, again, it circles back. We just came full circle to the work that you do with the empowerment and helping especially women make some of the decisions so they can, again, find their dream, make the decisions they need to make to change their life and then to move forward, especially with the conversation we're having about the heart math and, my comments about heart disease, because disease is actually dis-ease.
Absolutely.
So if you wanted to elaborate on that a little bit more, be my guest.
All right. Yes, absolutely. I think most people don't realize that they bring, most diseases, and especially autoimmune diseases, there's no direct cause why that happens. They can't find it, like with heart disease. Okay. They say that it's because of high cholesterol or whatever. That's their scientific way of describing it. But people don't understand that your emotions, we're mind, body, spirit. Everything is connected. And so what we put in is what comes out. And so if we just keep feeding ourselves with these negative emotions and staying in that negative place, and not expressing any positivity, not doing anything to let that go, it's got to show up somehow.
Mm-hmm.
And then it shows up as disease.
Mm-hmm.
And so that why is it that some people can have spontaneous healing from cancer or other diseases? And if you talk to these people, most of them will tell you is that they decided to just let go and start loving themselves and letting go of the small stuff. And even if it was big stuff, God forbid, I mean, who am I to talk? Like if, a woman was raped or molested or, physically or emotionally abused. I mean, that's horrific stuff. And I wouldn't wish that on anybody, but it's a choice whether you want to hold on to that or not.
Mm-hmm. And you can let go of anything and everything. And I think the perfect example was the woman that you were talking about, who was, a victim of, I can't even say his name.
And yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. But
the big M.
yeah, I mean, to me, that is an amazing, an amazing like spiritual awareness or awakening for her to be able to say, I have got to let that go. I forgive him, not don't really forgive what he, did or who he was, but it was to really enjoy the rest of my life and to be as healthy and happy as possible. You have to let that go. And that's a huge one. I mean, that is no small thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that takes tremendous courage. And, I applaud anybody who is a survivor of any kind of abuse or trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And most of us have had some kind of trauma. I mean, I'm sorry. If people say, oh, yeah, my childhood was perfect, it's like, okay, that's BS. We all know, no, every parent has good intentions, but we all do a great job at screwing up our kids. Let's face it. So, I think that's something that we have to remember and be realistic and look at our life and say, okay, what is really holding me back from having the kind of relationships, having the kind of life, having the kind of joy that I want?
Mm-hmm.
And it all comes back to yourself.
And it all keeps coming back to courage. That word keeps coming up. And courage is something that it's really hard. I think that like the shame and the guilt and all that is just so magnetic. And even when you try and get away from it, and it's like you can't just get away from it, you kind of have to deal with it first. But it just kind of keeps pulling you back somehow.
Well, it's interesting. I don't think you have to go back and heal it.
Mm.
I think what you need to do is shift your perspective.
Mm.
And instead of looking at it like, oh, this was horrific, look at it as a blessing. Because everything that's happened to you in your life has brought you to where you are now. And so if those events hadn't happened that way, who would you be? And so if you look at it like, you know what, it's made me stronger. It's just kind of flipping the coin from the negative to the positive.
Mm-hmm.
And try to look for all the blessings that you have in your life, regardless of what happened in the past, because the past is over. There's nothing you can do about it.
Mm-hmm.
All you can do is learn to live from this moment forward. And by living in gratitude and waking up every day, I think one of the most important things that I tell my clients to do is start making a gratitude list and put at least 100 things on there that you're grateful for. And this could be as simple as, that you have eyes and you can see the beautiful sky outside. Mm-hmm. Like we take these things for granted, that we have hands, that we have a mouth, that we can taste yummy food. We have a nose, we can breathe and smell beautiful fragrances, we have to count all those little things as blessings. If you have a roof over your head and you're not sleeping in the park, in 115 degrees in Arizona in the summertime, like that's a huge blessing.
Mm-hmm.
But we take all of that for granted because we're not looking at what's good in our life.
It's so tempting just to look at what you don't have or look at what you are going through. And I think that maybe this past year, with everybody going through COVID, it's been a terrible inconvenience, let's just say, for a lot of us, and even worse for a lot of other people. But there are a lot of good things that have come out of it. some of the blessings and some of the opportunities that we've had, either to connect with other people, to learn how to use technology a little bit better, and to really kind of prioritize what is important in our lives and what are the things that we can let go of. And I think that's been a huge lesson, not only for me, but for a lot of the people that I've talked to, a lot of my friends and a lot of the new friends that I've been meeting online, because I haven't met anybody face to face in a long time.
Yeah, I agree. And again, you can look at it and be bitter, like, oh, that we have no freedom and we have to go out in masks and we have all these inconveniences and we can't see people in person, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or again, turn it around and say, okay, so what good has come out of this? Thank God I'm still alive.
And look at how much money I'm saving on gas.
Exactly. Exactly. Again, it's just really looking at, is your glass half full or is it half empty? We all have a choice in how we're going to view life.
So when somebody contacts you and wants to work with you, I mean, how do you start? Do you just start with, a casual conversation? Do you start like with an assessment? I mean, how does somebody initiate working with you as an empowerment coach?
So usually what I do is I would have somebody, they could either call me or book a time on my calendar directly, and then I would send them an assessment.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it's really important. I have found that people who aren't willing to fill out the assessment are not really people I want to work with, because they're not willing to take the time to dig deep and to really think about what's going on and where their strengths and weaknesses are. And I think that's important. It tells a lot about a person right there. And then I always start out with, a free intro coaching session where I can really, get to know them better. We can kind of dig deep into some of these areas that need working on, and that they can become really clear of, if we're a good fit for one another, and how I can help them in which areas, and obviously things progress as you progress, and we, make the tweaks along the way. There's not necessarily a set agenda that, okay, week 1, we're doing this, week 2, we're doing that, because life happens. And so really, it all goes in hand in empowering and really overcoming those negative mindsets to, and to learn to dream and create a life that you want.
That's interesting what you said about the assessment, because that's work that you have to put in right away. And that can be kind of intimidating for some people, or maybe they're just looking for a quick fix too, and they just don't want to put in the work. But when you're making major changes in your life, and when you are going through periods of empowerment, self-awareness, personal growth, it's a lot of work, and it can be really frightening. It can be intimidating, and it is hard work.
Absolutely. And, oftentimes my first initial, that intro call that, I do for free, it can be an hour, hour and a half long. I'm giving a lot of my time to this person. And so if they're not willing to do that assessment, to come to the session, fully prepared to get the best out of it, I don't want to, then I don't want to waste anybody's time. I don't want my time wasted, and I don't want their time wasted. Because really there's a kind of a flow to that first session of really seeing if we're a good fit for one another, and what they can get out of working with me, and where the areas that they need to work on the most. And it's really interesting to me. Like, I was working with this young woman who, she was single in her early 30s, really wanted to get married and didn't know, what was holding her back. And she was saying that, like, she feels like she keeps setting these men up for failure, like that they're going to leave her, and then they do. And so, I said to her, tell me a little bit about your father. And so she said, oh, well, my parents got divorced when I was like 13 years old, and my father moved out of the area, right? Well, hello, abandonment issues. So she's now setting up every single guy expecting them to abandon her, and she pushes them until they do.
Mm.
Right. So sometimes just, and she wasn't even aware of that until I said that to her. And then all of a sudden the light bulb went on. Right. And so it's like, okay, now we know what we need to work on. What is the main core that we need to deal with first, that first issue, and then we can, work on the rest of it. But, let's heal that. And then we can work on the self-esteem and the self-love and, self-worthiness, all the other areas that come along with that. Mm-hmm. So oftentimes that very first session can be very, very insightful, because I pick up on things, just from my training and background that they may never have seen to begin with.
So I'm really kind of curious, with your background, as you were going through your own personal transition in becoming single again, was your professional training very helpful to you? Did it make it less difficult or painful in going through this transition? And how did the rest of your family react when you're like, okay, I think, yeah, we're done here?
That's a great question. I was meditating one day and I got this message that, I need to get divorced. And so like the next day, I just kind of said to him, I think I want a divorce. And that special client I was telling you about, I told her about it, and she was like, I think you guys need to, try to see if there's anything there. Mm-hmm. Right. And I'm like, okay, she's very intuitive. And so I had gone away for the weekend and I came back and I realized, like, okay, so let's try to work this out. And we tried, but you know what? He's still stagnant. And it's so interesting to me. He's going through this whole identity crisis and chose the moment when I said that I want a divorce, that's when he's going to start therapy. And it's like, hello, like you've seen, I've been going through this growth transition for the last 3 or 4 years. I mean, he finally got to the point where he would say to me, you know what, I don't want to hear about this anymore. And I guess because he felt so threatened by his lack of growth. And I realized, like, I really felt like my wings were clipped. And in order to be able to create what I want to create, I need to be willing to move on and to go forward. And so, after a few weeks, I was like, you know what, this isn't working. I just, I want a divorce and I want to move forward. And, my kids were, I think they were supportive at the beginning, but now I plan on moving out of the country. So now they're all abandonment. And I'm like, I can't abandon you. You're an adult. So now, whether, it's different if you were a kid, and with everybody not seeing each other anyway, it doesn't matter if I'm here in a different country. But I feel peace. I feel, that first weekend when I went away, I felt like I missed him a bit, because he's been my best friend for 24 years. Mm-hmm. But again, that friendship had limitations as well. And just because of his lack of growth. And I told him oftentimes over the last few years, like, you're stagnant. You need to do something to get, to kind of jumpstart yourself again. And he wasn't at that place or ready to do it. So, God bless him. I wish him well. And, we're still talking and probably always will. Just, our time together just kind of fizzled out, and I'm okay with that.
I think that's adorable about your children. I think about abandonment issues in their adults. It's so funny.
Yeah. Well,
and the other thing I wanted to point out too, one of the analogies you used is you felt like your wings were clipped. So I just want to point out that your beautiful logo is actually of a butterfly.
Yes.
That represents transformation and the ability to take flight.
Yes, absolutely. I love that metaphor. And even all the transitions that I've done with my business, my logo always had a butterfly in it, some kind of butterfly, because of what it represents.
So do you have any specific words of wisdom or pearls of wisdom that you would like to impart on our listeners?
Sure. Well, I think it's really, really important to start to learn to live in the moment
Mm.
and to begin to open your eyes to new experiences and new thought processes, because we get stuck in patterns. And sometimes we can hear the same thing over and over again. And only until we're open and ready to hear it differently do we get a different message from that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, really being open to what is out there, really being open to see life differently than you ever have before. And really, don't be so hard on yourself. You have to learn to let go of the past, to learn to forgive yourself for holding on to all those negative emotions, and to, move into courage and beyond by just being really mindful of what your emotions are. And I think it's really important when you find yourself sinking back into those negative mindsets. They say what we focus on grows, right? So if you're focusing on all those negative emotions, then you get more negative emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And once you start catching yourself and pivot to those positive thoughts of gratitude that you have in your life, all of a sudden you're going to see more things to be grateful for.
Mm-hmm. And how can people get a hold of you?
So you can reach me. I have a Facebook page called Suddenly Single. Mm-hmm. And, feel free to join there. I believe I have a book button on there that you can get to my calendar, or, maybe it'll be in the description, or you can call me at 480-719-5535. And I'll be happy to schedule that appointment for you and get your email to send you out the assessment. And if you're really ready to take flight and to, create something different and let go of the past, I'm here to help.
And I have to ask you, when are you going to take flight and leave the country?
I am hoping by the end of this month. End of this month.
Oh my goodness. I didn't realize it was that soon.
Yeah.
It's very exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just waiting for certain things to fall into place, and then I'll be out of here. I've already started packing and, to make a lift, to send my stuff over there, and just getting ready to go.
And this is a permanent move.
Yes.
Wow. Well, good luck to you. And thank you, Shira. Thank you so much for being on the show. It's been great, fantastic information, wonderful tips, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And I appreciate everything that you do here and having me on as well. This was awesome. I really enjoyed myself.
And everyone, thank you so much for listening. And remember to pay attention to yourself and catch yourself when you're going down into that negative and the negative self-talk, and turn it around. Go to the positive. Learn how to dream again. If you need help with that, you know who to call. Give Shira a call and she can help you. But life is way too short to be unhappy. And so just do what you have to do to be able to move on and get those higher vibrations and live in a place of self-love, self-confidence, courage, and joy, and beyond. And that is the way of the FemiNinja. And that's a wrap on another episode of the FemiNinja Project. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, be safe, be strong, and until next time, bye now.